So hello everyone, we are team number 13 and we are the creators of AMR Predictor. The problem that we wanted to focus on was the use of beta-lactams in treatment. Basically, right now, more than 50% of all prescribed antibiotics are beta-lactams, and they're actually very efficient. Unless the bacteria can produce an enzyme that affects the antibiotic, and this means that the treatment is no longer effective. We designed a program, and basically, so we start here. The patients come to the hospital, they're sick. They take a clinical sample, the hospital takes a clinical sample, and then the hospital would sequence the sample to get a sequence of the enzyme. The sequence would then be introduced into our program. Basically, you put a sequence into the program, and voila, it tells you which antibiotics not to use. So which antibiotics this specific bacteria is resistant to. Right now, what is special about our product is that it's based on machine learning, which means that we do have a database that has sequences, and we know which antibiotics don't work for that specific enzyme. There is absolutely possible that there are other variants of this enzyme, so our program would be able to predict if there would be a new variant introduced, which antibiotics will not be used for that. We would also like to encourage doctors to follow up on the treatment, which means that they would be putting in the program which antibiotics they used and which worked.
This, of course, has a large potential impact on all levels. The patient, reducing disease severity and length, getting the right prescription, avoiding health complication and adverse events, risk of death. In the primary care level, we reduce patient reattendance to GPs and providing guidance to doctors on the prescription. In secondary care, we can reduce hospitalizations, avoid additional costs per patient when they come again. And of course, this saves large amounts of money that we predict is going to happen in 2050 due to AMR on all levels. And of course, this affects us all in the world. We can reduce the effects of AMR, the deaths, as well as the poverty that comes along with it.
So our initial plan is to find investor that will help us with step 1 and step 2, so the testing of the credibility and safety of our product. After we have the proof of concept, we would like to partner with bigger company that would help us enter the market in hospitals, which will be our primary customers. We would like to do the pilot testing in hospitals and hopefully develop our products more. That's all. Thank you.
So, we are team AMR Equip, and AMR is already a significant human and economic problem nowadays. For example, in a country like Canada, there's already 5,000 deaths per year associated to AMR, and that's about the number of people who are dying in car accidents every year. And AMR is already causing a loss of money equivalent to 10% of GDP growth every year. And if you think it's a problem now, it's going to get worse, because up to 2050, we expect the problem to get 3 times worse. So, in order to solve the problem, to save human lives and to save money, there is many things we should do, but one thing we should do is to bring new antibiotics to the market. And this is not happening right now, and essentially the problem is that pharma companies aren't investing in antibiotics. And they're not doing that because if you bring a new antibiotic to the market, it's not going to get a lot of sales, because the new antibiotics are going to be reserved in order to treat only the patients that are resistant to antibiotics. So there's no incentive to invest in them. So what should we do about it? And we should do something soon because it takes 10 years to develop a new antibiotic. So since market is unlikely to address the issue on its own, there's people like Louise who are thinking hard of ways to have the government intervene in order to help bring new antibiotics to the market. Because it's not all dark. Like research in the past decade has brought a number of new antibiotic molecule candidates out of the research pipeline. But right now, those molecules still need to be tested in clinical trials, and this costs a lot of money. So how can we make this happen? Well, there's many options, and Louise is wondering which one is the right one. Should Louise develop a policy where the government would provide stipends to pharma companies in order to encourage them to go for clinical trials, even if the sales are going to be low? Or should she instead try to push for an agenda where governments come up in consortia and chip in money together in order to hire pharma companies to make clinical trials, a bit like the US government did with NASA back in the 60s in order to go to the moon? Or should Louise instead promote an agenda where you have a national company that develops antibiotics? Right now, the answer is not very clear, and it's hard for Louise to find out how to answer the question, because AMR is at the intersection of, there's many actors involved, and they have different agendas, and they're promoting different solutions, and all of them has a partial understanding of the problem. For example, there's farmers, there's meat eaters, there's patients, there's pharma.
1 minute.
Lots of actors. So what should she do?
Well, what definitely she should do, she should look at the bigger picture. And we are proposing to really take it to the highest level and look at all the economic interactions between so many different moving parts. There is a lot of good stuff that is happening already and a lot of things that are addressed, but what we are proposing is not existent yet. So we are proposing to use really latest advances in modeling, advanced multi-method modeling and system thinking approach to quantify all the costs and benefits that are existing between all these moving parts. And we will use latest advances, big data, artificial intelligence, deep learning, and blockchain, and genomics, and crowdsourcing. All these things will help us to populate the system and to enumerate all these interactions that will help policymakers to make those calls. Next steps, World Bank had agenda item that is not addressed. So exactly the same item that remains open. So we are proposing to establish advisory board, get hold of the World Bank and get it rolling. So this is our plan. Thank you.
Doctors, medical agencies, and veterinary institutes.
So, yes, so we have a little prototype. So we have, does this work? No?
No, I can't.
The USB needs to be connected into the computer.
It is.
Okay,
Sorry. So we have a login. So we would want every stakeholder that is involved anywhere in the pharmaceutical supply chain to be able to log in with their specific credentials, maybe from their institution, and then be redirected to a specific page. So for a doctor, for example, if a patient would rush into the hospital with a UTI, for example, we would want the personal number to be inserted and which antibiotic drug the doctor would want to prescribe, and they could add travel data and reasons for coming if they would want to. If everything would be fine, the doctor would get a notification that the antibiotic is in stock, and they could order a clinical microbiology test. At the same time, though, the Medical Product Agency would keep a track on shortages that would be occurring on specific pharmaceuticals. And if they would say that, okay, for example, this antibiotic would be in shortage, they would add some more information on it. No? Yes. And they would also suggest maybe a pharmaceutical that would have similar ingredients that the doctor could use instead. So in case of a shortage, the doctor would actually get a notification saying this antibiotic is not available and a recommendation for another treatment. Then the clinical microbiology would get up in a page where they would get please do this analysis. And when they would run their analysis, they would be able to enter in the information. On the sample ID, what species they have identified, and if this species has shown any resistances. This information would then also be connected to the veterinary institute. They would get an alert. We have detected a resistance or an unusually high amount of resistance, and they could access all the information that the clinical microbiology would have put into the application. They instead could also,
So the SVA could also add in information. There's one between. Is there not?
No.
Okay, so there's one slide missing, but they could also add in information that they can get out from testing if they find out resistances that have occurred on farms or in the environment or with animals or wildlife. And then we could also add one where the patients could actually put consent on putting their information from 1177, for example, into this database. And yes.
Yeah. So we don't only have slides, we also implemented a nice prototype in WordPress and the database behind. So this is how the user would experience the website. So we have a nice logo presenting the antibiotic pills and our central aim, what we want to achieve. And all the different partners are listed in our scheme, and the user eventually has to log in, identify themselves, and then they can actually start to upload data in such kind of forms. So the main step is to find new developers, motivate them to join our project, because there's a lot of work to be done. The action logic needs to be implemented, and we want to present this idea at the Uppsala Innovation Board Center.
We would like to test this prototype or the idea in the Uppsala region, because we believe that majority of the stakeholders within the antibiotic supply chain. And we got inspired, and through thorough research, we found that different stakeholders in this antibiotic supply chain requested or needed an extension.
Thank you.
So hi Eleni, thank you for contacting me about AntiBX, which we believe is a blockchain and cryptocurrency capability that can combat AMR globally. Before we get started in the conversation, it'd be good to know what issues you have in your area right now.
So I'm a healthcare professional in Vietnam, and I see AMR every day. Especially last year we had MDR, a lot of MDR cases for E. coli with thalassemia, and I'm really frustrated because I don't have the resources to carry out my regular practice in the hospital, but I don't have resources to do surveillance as well.
Okay, that's a problem we hear about quite often from individuals like yourself. Before we get into a conversation, let me just play you a video to give you an overview of what we do.
Is spreading faster than we can develop solutions. Imagine a future with a cybernetic collective of people and machines plugged in as nodes on a network, collectively feeding it with information to fuel development of innovation therapies, to treat superbugs and minimize their global rise in prevalence. All nodes are economically aligned through blockchain with enforced property rights. The neuron tokens represent ownership of research data property rights to mediate participation in the decentralized research organization, and in doing so, building a progressively greater intelligence. This is exactly what we are creating through AntiBX, with the aim of allowing anyone to participate in research and development and exploit commercial copyright value associated with open research data, while at the same time making such information accessible in an open source marketplace. Through AntiBX, we can start to close that gap and provide a real challenge with an equitable approach.
Do you like that, Eleni?
Yeah, I think it works really well.
So in relation to yourself, what we would do is actually meet with you and discuss what options we have available. So we do have a phone app where you can collect certain parameters of data. That data is actually developed with experts from around the world, from AMR, from blockchain, app development, and also economists as well. So you can then personalize that to your area and your region. The beauty is any data you input into that system from your computer or your phone, that will be tracked back to you on a blockchain. So you have traceability of that coming from you. The beauty of that is, as the data grows globally from all sources, you can connect with people around the world to talk about the issues you have. You can use your own local data to do your own surveillance locally, but also you can publish your data on an open source platform or collaborate with other individuals to talk about your issues globally to come to a solution. And as the ecosystem grows, the value of AntiBX grows as well.
All right, cool. I can see the value of AntiBX and how it can help me as a professional to do things and help in my local region. So how do you benefit from this?
So we just hold a platform, so as more people enter data into it, the more valuable the platform becomes. The beauty for you is as your data is tracked back to you, you own that data. So as the ecosystem grows, you grow with the ecosystem as well, which is why we believe this is an equitable approach to tackle AMR. You get real-time data, you can speak to individuals on a regular basis, and also you get increasing value for the work you put in as well.
So AntiBX is a ready-made product that you can use tomorrow. So all we ask from JPIAMR is endorsement to bring this product into life. Thank you.
Waiting room at the GP. The child turned sick and she is wondering about the cause. She heard about troubling news of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Could they be the cause? There's a poster in the game for a game about handling antibiotics. To get more insight and pass the time, she scans the QR code. This is what she sees. By answering questions about daily situations, she gets feedback on how her actions impact health and antibiotic resistance.
Welcome to the waiting room game. Please select a character. You are the parent of a 5-year-old child who has a persistent sore throat for the last week. Which option do you choose? I'm sorry, you have selected an option which would increase antimicrobial resistance. Your health has gone down and resistance has increased. Would you like to know more? Please click on the link and try again. Congratulations, you have selected an option which is the best option in this situation and have won a compliance badge.
Cool. So, increasingly, people are aware about antibiotic resistance. But they want to know what they can do to actually help. Unlike climate change, as a community, we haven't been all that successful at communicating this. In a recent study across Europe, 2/3 of respondents, and going up to 80% in Sweden, said that they wanted more information about antibiotics, what they can do. The great news is that there are things that people can do. These are very simple, basic public health messages, and they're tremendously impactful when we think about different ways to tackle AMR. Things like reducing infections through good hand hygiene in the home and elsewhere, and using antibiotics well. They have other benefits as well. They improve individuals' health, they reduce resistance, and they also reduce the need for new antibiotics. It's extremely cost-effective as an approach to tackle antimicrobial resistance. So we think there's an opportunity here because the current packaging of these messages hasn't been very effective. So what we'd like to do is to combine evidence-based, action-centered messages, moving beyond awareness about antibiotic resistance, with gamification. We think that games are a good way to improve knowledge and awareness, empower through concrete actions, and they're enjoyable and interactive. And the aim here would be to reduce AMR burden sustainably at a comparably low cost compared with other interventions. You've just seen one of the things that we've been working on the past couple of days, which is a prototype for the waiting room game. We've decided that the waiting room would be a very nice place to trial out this gamification idea because it's an effective location for delivering such a platform, for raising awareness about it. On average in Sweden, people visit the doctor 3 times a year. They're sitting there, they're looking a little bit bored, they all have smartphones. In a certain GP practices, you could even have tablets that are on display to really engage people with it. And all you need is some simple advert for it. We've, over the past couple of days as well, tried to include gamification and looking at the different sort of personalities that are attracted to gaming and why, and including different elements in the demo there. We've also had a business model canvas to think about a strategy for making this into a reality in the longer term. In terms of a roadmap, we're a really big, slightly smaller today, but big committed interdisciplinary team here. And we want to continue with this. And we'd like to form some partnerships with scientific societies, funders, and agencies to make this a reality. I think in the next 6 months, it would be very easy to create this minimum lovable product that we could pilot test in a few primary care practices in Sweden and get really user-centered feedback on how to make this relevant.
Welcome, thank you. So we have a patient that is coming into primary care and they're feeling very unwell. They have pain on peeing and urinary frequency. So Joe, the doctor, does a urine dipstick and diagnoses a urinary tract infection. However, Joe, as a doctor, is feeling rushed, feeling very tired, just wants to give the prescription and doesn't want to really look up any new information, doesn't have any idea about what's going on with community antimicrobial resistance, and so ends up writing a prescription the way that they've written prescriptions in the past 20 years. This is how it looks currently, and it's essentially taking an electronic version and basically moving up to a typewriter. So there's a lot of cognitive overload. This is a problem of writing prescriptions in primary care because 90% of them are written this way and 90% of prescriptions are written in primary care. So our solution today is to propose that we want to decrease inappropriate antibiotic prescriptions and want to increase the quality of the prescriptions. And we have created an antibiotic prescription module for prescribers in primary care. And this is really special because it capitalizes on existing data platforms and it decreases the cognitive load for prescribers to have a smart decision support tool, as well as it creates an AMR surveillance system. So this is the first in class product.
Okay, so what have we actually built? This is a screenshot of the prototype that exists that uses actual data that we have for Joe as a decision support. So number one, Joe's not going to start by putting in the antibiotic directly, but by putting in the diagnosis at step one. And then at step two, immediately being offered from the data that exists that we used to build this product, get suggested an antibiotic, a first-line antibiotic that from the data we know works best for the specific community that Joe practices in. So the first-line antibiotic choice here is tied to the diagnosis and to all the information about the environment that Joe practices in. And she can just rubber stamp this and is done with a prescription, like of the first-line, most effective first-line antibiotic. But if she wants to go to second or third line, she can also do that with this drop-down menu here. But at the same time, in panel 3, she's also confronted with her prescribing behavior of second and third line antibiotics versus that of her colleagues. So the average is purple, Joe's red, and Joe can see if she considers going second or third line, she's actually overprescribing second line antibiotics. And and this has very clear implications because it's going to reduce wrong prescriptions, and there's a very clear economic case for that.
Yes, that brings us on to the business case. So we looked at this from the health system's perspective in terms of potential savings from more appropriate prescriptions. So this would lead to a reduction in the number of prescriptions which, for which the organism that's actually causing the infection is resistant. And by doing this, you reduce repeat appointments and you also would reduce some hospitalizations. So when we calculated this through using the data we have from Canada, we estimated that it would be about $2 cheaper on average for each case of urinary tract infection, and that adds up to $3.5 million per year across Canada because it's a very common infection. Set against that, we have the cost of actually developing this system. So we believe it would cost somewhere between $200,000 and $1 million to develop the system, and perhaps another $100,000 to $200,000 per year to maintain it. So we believe this is a sustainable product, it's scalable to other common infections, and what we need now is some funding to fully develop, validate, and pilot this in a single region.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. We are from the Emerging Threat Detector. So our solution is a bioinformatics software that will help with AMR surveillance. So currently, we can benefit from sequencing bacteria to analyze surveillance and prevention. And the current pipeline is that people analyze and then they need a bioinformatician to make sense of the results. And the results are inconsistent between people who are analyzing the data. So and the reports that are produced are longer and complicated. So we need to make the reports more easy and fast way to analyze the data. So we proposed an EDT solution because it will provide automated reports from a curated data sets. And this curated data set is from a mining GenBank of all the genomes that have been submitted to assess the prevalence of AMR. And then we'll also be leveraging the existing CAD user bases to be able to use our software to assess AMR. And currently our software is almost done. And sustainability, we have experience from the underlying software we use. We license to private companies, and it's free for academic and government to use our software. So that way our software can keep going and help with AMR surveillance.
So your next question is going to be, how is ETD actually going to work? So for every isolate that's submitted through the CARD website, ETD will generate an automated report highlighting emerging AMR genes and resistance mutations for this bacteria in real time. And so the report will present different factors related to AMR resistance, such as the resistance mechanism, the drug class, and the gene location affected. In addition, it will provide a qualitative assessment here of the outbreak risk and import probability. This information can help public health professionals decide whether this isolate or related isolates warrant additional investigation or additional consideration for diagnostic care. So the simple first page of the report is going to be followed by a detailed presentation and analyses of the spatiotemporal, gene mobility, and evolutionary aspects, as well as resistance patterns. These reports can be downloaded, stored locally, and shared between public health professionals who will incorporate them into their day-to-day work. This information will provide these professionals with a more complete picture of emerging AMR in the areas where they live and work. In addition, the information on newly detected emerging resistances will also be disseminated in a publicly accessible manner. This curated information can be fed into news sources that will reach specialists, additional journalists, and also the wider public. The potential impact of ETD is wide-reaching and encompasses all of One Health. Human health, agriculture, and animal health professionals already use CARD and will greatly benefit from the additional analyses provided by ETD. In addition, ETD will greatly improve surveillance efforts worldwide and consequently help guide antimicrobial stewardship and clinical decision-making. And that is all from us. Thank you for your attention.